From the late 18th century into the mid-19th century, the United States transformed into an industrial nation from an agricultural one. As the American economy became increasingly textile-driven, it became more and more necessary to have an efficient way to transport raw materials from the South and West to the factories in New England. With new inventions and innovations, the American way of life was transformed into a largely commercial one.
Eli Whitney was an American inventor who created the revolutionary cotton gin. The cotton gin was 50 times more effective than the hand-picking process and increased production of raw cotton immensely. With his cotton gin, he introduced a system of interchangeable parts that revolutionized northern industry. The significance of this revolutionary invention led to America's shift from a primarily agricultural nation to an industrial one. Because sewing was made easier and quicker with the use of this machine, there was a lesser demand for labor but a higher demand for new machinery and inventions. Although the cotton gin required less manpower to pick out seeds from cotton, it increased slavery because the South now had a higher demand for planting cotton since they could pick it out so quickly. This ultimately led to the increase of slave labor. 19th century, Singer perfected the sewing machine. His invention became the very foundation of the ready-made clothing industry, which took place at around the time of the Civil War. This moved America into a new state of industrialization, because this invention also drove many seamstresses away from their rural lives in small-town businesses or home offices and forced them into industrial America in factories, seeing as handmade production wasn't sufficient. In these factories, these women worked as robots, hour by hour, mindlessly using the sewing machines to meet a factory quota, and together produced an abundance of manufactured goods ready to be sold daily. The Lowell Mill Girls were young female workers in early 19th century America who were employed in an innovative system of labor in textile mills centered in Lowell, Massachusetts. The employment of women was a large step in the male-powered society of the 19th century, and the Lowell Mill factory workers helped establish women's roles in the work industry. This is a big step in female labor because while the laborers did not have to be particularly strong, they had to be fairly educated and intelligent to work the complicated machinery. This was a significant event because it led to the acknowledgement of women's rights and was very radical in the time period in which women's rights went about unnoticed and not acknowledged. It also increased textile production by an extensive amount, boosting America's new textile-based economy even more. Many of these immigrants, both Irish and German, moved to Pennsylvania, became employed, and jumped straight into the middle class. This, of course, was met with resistance by Americans. During this time, there was a political party called the Know-Nothings. The members of this party were anti-German and anti-Irish Catholic, and wanted to purify American politics and society of these immigrants. The term nativist also arose during this time, as the American natives thought of their population as superior to the immigrants. During this time period, thousands of educated German revolutionaries fled to the United States in order to escape persecution in Germany. These people were called the German 48ers. Rather than being farmers and tradesmen like the early German immigrants, these men tended to be scientists, teachers, and lawyers. This brought upon a new kind of immigrant, one that was intelligent, civilized, and promoted American ideals of freedom. During this time period, Ireland had been suffering under the rule of the British, but to make matters worse, they were hit with a terrible rot attack of all of their potato crops, which the Irish people had become immensely dependent on. This left people penniless and starving and caused the masses to flee to the land of liberty and plenty, America. This was significant in America's history because it led to mass immigration. About 1 million immigrants of Irish peoples came into the United States. This mass immigration led to the surplus in American population and greater diversity of the United States. Their transition into American society was rough, as they established their lowest-ranking social class. This pushed up the prior lowest-ranking class at the socio-economic scale. This led to the abundance of available workers for the American workplace, and the supply led to America's shift from an agricultural-run nation to an industrially run nation due to the company's ability to open up more factories and spread the wealth.
Prior to the 1790s, the American domestic landscape primarily consisted of agricultural components, such as dirt roads. However, the country knew that having efficient methods of transportation would be highly beneficial for the economy and other such political relations, as demonstrated in the War of 1812 when the country had no infrastructure. Starting in 1794 with the American System by Henry Clay, the Philadelphia-Lancaster Turnpike was completed and proved to be a catalyst for other turnpikes. By 1821, 4,000 miles of turnpike had been built in the United States. The turnpikes were crucial in transporting goods, both raw and commercial, around the United States overland. As shipping goods became a massive part of the American economy and lifestyle, the United States needed some way to move products over water quicker than in the past. With the creation of the Erie Canal, a public work that stretched over 363 miles, the Great Lakes region could be connected to the port city of New York entirely by water. Building and expanding upon the steamboat proved to be vital for this waterway expansion. It provided quick, accessible transportation to transfer agricultural products throughout the country, as well as increase expansion to the west.
Like the steamboats, the locomotive engine provided quick, cost-efficient transportation throughout the nation. It allowed products grown in the far expanses of the country to be shipped overland to any of the major cities for export or commercial use. This meant cotton grown in Georgia could now be moved to Massachusetts very quickly so that it could be made into textiles in such cities as Lowell. Additionally, clipper ships were introduced on the international stage. These ships could travel far faster than regular ships and could be used on the high seas to transport goods around the world.
The McCormick reaper was a horse-drawn mechanism that was used to cut and harvest ripe crops with ease. This was designed by Cyrus McCormick, who was an American innovator of the 19th century. McCormick's invention allowed crops to be harvested with less labor, increasing efficiency. This augmentation in efficiency increased output of farms and began to help with the industrialization of the nation.
Overall, the new ideas, inventions, and immigrants of early 19th century America allowed for the conversion of an agricultural-based economy into an industrial powerhouse.